A Las Vegas photo shoot turns deadly. A model posing with a gun allegedly shoots and kills her photographer. That model appeared in a Vegas courtroom this week. She reportedly had an obsession with guns, even a bullseye tattooed on her chest. And according to police, she claims it was an accident. But there could be some evidence that suggests otherwise. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. This story in some ways could have shades of what happened on the set of the movie Rust in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where you have someone who behind the lens loses their life, shot by someone who thought that the gun was unloaded, or that's what they said. Because in this case, that is the argument that the defendant is making. Here is the defendant, 20-year-old Alessandra Blay. She was in a Clark County courtroom this week in Nevada. We saw with our cameras that she did appear to have tears in her eyes as she sat in the courtroom ahead of her first court appearance. She's now charged with open murder with a deadly weapon. Here's what police say happened as we go back to August 23rd. This is according to Fox 5 in Las Vegas. They reviewed the court documents in Clark County, and they say when police arrived around 5 o'clock in the morning to a home in Las Vegas, they found Mark Gauguin dead on the ground. He had been shot in the neck. Now, this is video of the private TikTok, now private TikTok, of Alessandra Blay, because she was at the home with Gauguin, who was actually her boyfriend of roughly 6 months, according to police records. Gauguin was a model. He also, that morning, was a photographer. Now, police say at that home was also another woman and her boyfriend. It was around 4:30 in the morning. They had been drinking, and the two girls who were there decided it was time for a photo shoot. And between 4:30 that morning and 5 o'clock when police arrived, gunshots were fired. Gauguin was hit. He lost his life. Now, the man who called 911 was the boyfriend of the other girl who was involved in this photo shoot, according to police, with Alessandra Blay. Now, the caller said that when he went outside, he saw Gauguin on the ground, and Blay was the one who allegedly shot him. But she said it was an accident. Police say they found two Polaroid pictures from this photo shoot, and those pictures reportedly show Blay holding a gun and the other girl holding a knife. Now, here's where part of this story could draw some comparisons to the Rust movie set case, because Blay claimed that she did not think the gun was loaded. She did not believe that there was a bullet in the chamber. She said the gun was being used as a prop for this impromptu photo shoot. She also allegedly admitted to not taking a firearm safety class. So she was saying she doesn't really know how to handle guns or what happened. But this is where it appears there could be more to this story, according to the court documents that Fox 5 in Vegas looked over, because the gun apparently belonged to the man who was calling 911. And he told police that before he fell asleep that night, he took the magazine out. He emptied the chamber and he locked the slide back. So this gun, he says, was empty and it was not armed. Now, his girlfriend reportedly told police that when they were about to do the photo shoot, she noticed that the gun Blay was holding had the magazine in it, that it had been allegedly put back in. Now, on top of that, Blay perhaps did not let on to police just how familiar she was with guns, or maybe how she embraced gun culture. This is a TikTok that shows her photoshopping in guns to her video. Now, law enforcement found in a search of her social media accounts, she reportedly often talked about guns online, and she said, quote, "I wish I could shoot people with real guns and get away with it." She also talked about wanting to shoot prostitutes and homeless people, according to police. And there was also a conversation that she had with Gauguin, the victim in this story, where he told her they could go and shoot a dummy. And she allegedly responded, and I quote, "We gotta shoot someone real. Going to be the tunnels. If it's only one a night, the police will remain clueless." Blay's court hearing on Tuesday, it was a brief appearance, just her first in front of a judge, now charged with open murder with a firearm. Blay said she understood the charges that she was facing, and also she was represented by a public defender. She is next expected to be in court for a preliminary hearing on October 2nd. Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, let's talk about something important, because you ever notice how some habits just sneak into your day without you even realizing it. And for a lot of people, that means reaching for something on autopilot because you're stressed or run down, even though you know it is not good for you, which is why I want to tell you about our sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that is great for combating oral fixation and fidgeting. It delivers great taste as your usual pick-me-up without any harmful chemicals. Instead of inhaling vapor, you simply breathe in natural, non-toxic flavors that satisfy the craving without the downside. Fume isn't about quitting, it's about replacing. It's a flavored air device that gives you that same hand-to-mouth habit, but without the downsides. And there's no vapor, no nicotine, just natural, non-toxic flavors. Take a look at the design. It's a sleek wooden piece that feels great in your hand, and the magnetic fidget features are satisfying. It's perfect for when you're stressed and you need something to keep you focused. Plus, it's portable. You can take this anywhere. There is a lot of flavors to choose from. A lot of people like crisp mint. It is super refreshing, perfect for keeping you sharp throughout the day, but there are tons of flavors to choose from, so you can find your favorite. More than 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit change journey, so if you're ready to try it for yourself, now's the time. For a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack, using my code, you'll get a free Fume topper, which is an awesome accessory to level up your experience. Click the link, tryfume.com/law&crime, or scan the QR code on your screen to get yours today. Joining us now is former federal prosecutor and the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. So the defendant in this case, her charge is open murder with deadly weapon. What does that entail, as opposed to in some states we hear first degree, second degree murder? What is open murder?
Open murder is something that's unique to Nevada, and it allows the prosecution to charge murder and let the jury or judge decide what type of murder it is. So obviously murder can be first degree murder, which is premeditated. It can be second degree murder, which is murder with malice. And of course, there's different types of manslaughter, voluntary or involuntary, and it makes a huge difference. At least under Nevada law, first degree murder, the premeditated, carries a life sentence. The second degree, you drop down to a minimum of 10 years, and then you start getting to the involuntary manslaughter, you're looking at 4 years. So huge spread there, and really it allows the prosecution to make their case and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at this case, and I'll get into the evidence in just a moment, you could see, at face value of what this suspect and now defendant is saying, is that more of a manslaughter, this was an accident, or was it something more than that? How does it work then in court with actually determining what type of murder this is?
So it's really going to be up to the jury if this is a jury case. So in some other states, you'll see lesser included, right? You'll see alternates, right? First degree murder. If the jurors reach that conclusion, they don't look at the other potential charges. Then you look at potential second degree, and then you kind of work your way down. We really saw this a lot in the Cameron Reed case. Obviously, we covered here on Law and Crime, and there was a lot of lesser includeds, and the jurors were confused. But by charging open, you allow the jurors to really decide, hey, was this premeditated? Was this just an accident? Or was this something that was done with gross negligence or a depraved heart or a malignant mind? What we sometimes will use as malice murder. So it allows the jurors to decide, really, what was this? This is going to be some sort of homicide conviction, but whether it's manslaughter or premeditated, that's going to be up to the finder of fact.
And we'll see what Alessandra Blay, what her defense is. We know a little bit of what she said to police to this point, and then they've looked into her social medias. And when you look at this case and what we know thus far, how would you charge this? What would you see this as if you were a juror?
If I'm a juror in this case, or even if I'm a prosecutor, I think I would need more for premeditation. Premeditation requires sort of plotting and planning. Obviously, look, whenever anyone's in a romantic relationship and one of them ends up dead, there's always that possibility that it was a premeditated execution. But, if they're just being reckless, playing Russian roulette, something to that effect, that's still second-degree murder. But if it's purely an accident, you don't know the gun was loaded, and it accidentally discharges, that's textbook involuntary manslaughter. You're still criminally liable because you were negligent. But if there was no gross negligence or recklessness. It's just that simple negligence. It's manslaughter. So I would really need to know more. Obviously, law enforcement, they're talking about those social media messages. Did it have anything to do with the death that ensued in this particular case? Is that what they wanted to do, actually shoot and kill someone? Or was this just friends saying something stupid, completely inappropriate and unlawful on social media that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the crime?
And you look at her, her point of view from it, from apparently what she told police. She said that she thought that this was a prop, that she didn't think the gun was loaded, that she didn't think that all of this was just an accident. And my mind kind of went to the Alec Baldwin Rust case. Very different case in a lot of ways, but you have someone behind the lens who ends up getting shot because someone, argued that they didn't know that the gun was going to go off. But to actually prove that in a case like this, where you do have these social media, messages that she sent back and forth, the social media that shows that she reportedly had some obsession with firearms. And then the issue of how did the gun end up getting loaded in terms of the magazine going back in when the guy who owned it said that it wasn't when he went to bed. How would you actually be able to prove that if you were the defense?
Well, you really want to look at the witnesses, right? So obviously Baldwin, a unique case, certainly not a murder case. Baldwin was told by Assistant Director Dave Halls that it was a cold gun. Now, Helena Hutchins, as an armorer, she was also charged and she was convicted. It's her job to maintain the gun. A little bit of a different case here, but you do have a witness, actually the witness who called 911. So she's going to be very, very important in this case in terms of what exactly happened. So, there's a couple ways that this could go. Obviously, the gun is loaded and you're messing around with it. Well, that's probably murder too, right? That's really reckless. The other would be the opposite extreme, is you believe sincerely that the gun is not loaded and you're using it as a prop, right? Maybe similar to what happened with Baldwin, right? Obviously, in that particular case, the gun was loaded, but he thought it was loaded with blanks. The third possibility is something in the middle where you didn't even check, right? And you're messing around with a gun. You don't know whether it's loaded or not. So I think that would still be criminally reckless, gross negligence, in my opinion. That would also be murder. If you're holding a firearm, you don't even bother to check if it's loaded, and you point it at someone, or you don't point it away from someone. So really, what she knew and when she knew it is going to be very important. And obviously, we know what she's saying, but as far as her friend goes, I think that's going to be a very, very important witness in this case.
And as far as the social media messages, where she had this reported fascination with guns, she even said that, according to the reports, that she wanted to shoot someone, be able to get away with it, and then even said stuff that would be threatening to people who are homeless or work in the sex industry. Those are, people have personas online, they have opinions online, and that doesn't necessarily cross into the reality of who they are. In a case like this, if you're the prosecution, how do you take what she said online and use that against her in court?
Yeah, you really want to tie it to this crime. Now, I think the defense is going to argue here's clearly someone who had a fascination with firearms. They're conducting a photo shoot with firearms, right? Now, I think what you want to do is bring that in and just show the sort of causal connection. Obviously, the timing matters. If it's hours before, that's great. If it's years before, not so helpful, right? So you really want to tie it into what happened in this particular case. Obviously, there's been some drinking involved apparently too. That sort of cuts both ways. It's not a legal defense. You don't get a walk, but it can be used to help argue some of the intent. So I really think we need to see more to really get to that premeditation. Again, talking about guns, talking about wanting to kill prostitutes or homeless people, that's terrible. That's a little bit different than shooting and killing your boyfriend during a photo shoot. Presumably you're in a relationship, you like that person. Now obviously things can go sideways if there's infidelity or abuse or something else that would cause someone to want to kill their significant other. Again, if I were the defense, and I don't do defense work, but I would argue, as terrible as it is, killing a stranger, a transient, is very different from someone that you're romantically involved with.
What would you expect? Because I know as a prosecutor, you might game plan in your mind about what the defense is going to do at a trial. It doesn't seem like it's really up for debate at this point about whether or not the gun was in her hand and the gun then goes off. But from a defense point of view, what is the outcome that you're actually going for in this case? Because the idea at this point that she would get off without prison time seems like that'd be a stretch.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. If you're defending a murder case, usually there's really only a few types of defenses. One is it wasn't me. The other is it was self-defense. And the third is that, I didn't intend to do it, right? It was an accident. So I think that's what we're going to be dealing with here. You obviously have a witness. You have an admission to law enforcement that she was the one who shot and killed her boyfriend. So you're not going to be able to argue any type of self-defense or that it was someone else. You really got to attack that intent, do argue that it was an accident and that it was involuntary manslaughter to try to get a lesser sentence. This is a case that it's entirely about mitigation. You're not going to get a walk here.
And going back to the open murder charge she's facing, because there are, I feel like there are some states where there's this debate of like, is it first degree murder? Is it second degree murder? Was there premeditation? Was it not premeditation? Without the open murder type charge in Nevada, how does it typically work in a state like California where you have a case like this?
Exactly. So, I'm in California as well. We have offices in Vegas. We have offices all throughout California. So in California, this would be prosecuted as a lesser included. I don't think, unless we have something more, we would get to that first degree premeditated murder. In California, it's called special circumstances murder that would result in a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole, similar to what the Menendez brothers were facing before they were resentenced. So you would get to second degree murder, which is murder that is not premeditated but is malicious, right? And that's the gross recklessness, the negligence that we talked about. So that would be the top charge. Again, absent some evidence of premeditation that we don't know about. So it would be second degree murder that carries a potential sentence of 25 to life. But then a lesser included sentence, if the jury does not find the defendant guilty of second degree murder, they can consider involuntary manslaughter. And that's someone who is negligent, it can be simple negligence, and a death ensues. And kind of the example I like to give between sort of something that might be murder is someone who's driving more than 100 miles an hour, right? The PCH case, Pacific Coast Highway, where the 4 Pepperdine students were killed. That individual is being charged with murder because he was driving at a high rate of speed. Someone that's under the influence of drugs or alcohol significantly and they kill someone, that's reckless. That's gross negligence. If you happen to be, texting and driving, which is still reckless, and you accidentally kill someone, that's probably going to be manslaughter. It's something that's going to be lesser in terms of the negligence that we're dealing with. So a big difference, at least under California law, and Nevada as well, when you're dealing with murder and manslaughter.
When you look at some of the evidence that we know of at this point, there's a lot that we still don't know, but it seems like, again, going back to these, it goes from this, hey, it was an accident, I don't know that, it would happen, to then suddenly you open up the meta accounts and police are like, well, it seems like you knew a lot more about guns than you were telling us. Would you expect the defense to try and suppress that, to try to get that thrown out ahead of a trial? I mean, how would they go about doing that? If you have these text messages where one could argue it has nothing to do with this isolated incident, or at least the defense would want you to know that, how do you go about making the argument, if you were the defense, to make sure that's not included in a trial?
So what you want to do is file your motions in limine. This is really important, right? So obviously the government is going to argue that this is what we call 404B evidence, right? This shows someone's motive, a lack of mistake, opportunity, right? It's relevant to what happened here. And the defense is going to argue that it should be excluded under 403. It really has no relevance to this crime. It's too far removed. It's talking about something else, other victims. Now, it could be used as admissions against the defendant. She's saying that this was an accident, it's the first time using guns, or, she hasn't handled firearms or certainly isn't experienced. Well, if she has all these social media messages, it can come in to impeach her as well, her own testimony. So there's a couple ways you can get this in if you're the prosecution, to show that lack of mistake, but also to show that the defendant's not credible and to use her own words against her.
And then just lastly for you, Neva, this story, it just seems very unique. Especially too, that police found 2 Polaroids, they say, on scene, showing this photo shoot that was going on before the gun goes off. And they say that, in some way she pulled the trigger. Have you seen, I mean, how common is it to see an accidental shooting case like this with this type of evidence and this type of defendant?
Chris, I've seen a lot of accidental shooting cases. Unfortunately, kids getting a hold of guns. Gun safety is a big problem in this country. Guns not being locked up. I can tell you, I've been doing this almost 25 years. I haven't seen an accidental gun-related death involving a photo shoot. That's a new one to me. Obviously, we've seen it on movie sets. There's plenty of those, but not involving a photo shoot with guns. That's really a first. So I guess, you learn something new every day. But this one's very unique. And really what happened during that photo shoot is going to be dispositive in this open murder case in Nevada.
And one more I just thought about, because, the Baldwin case is very different in a lot of ways, but just thinking that it was a person behind a camera who was doing it. And in that case, there was this question of how the gun went off at all. And Alec Baldwin said he didn't pull the trigger. How would you go about, and some of the evidence you'd be looking for if you were a prosecutor on this case, to determine whether it was intentional that the gun was fired?
Yeah, so, Baldwin was a little bit different. By the way, I think I said it was Helena Hutchins. It was Hannah Gutierrez Reed who was the armorer.
Yes.
Helena Hutchins was the cinematographer, the victim. Obviously, that was a different case because she was behind the camera. She asked Baldwin to point the firearm at her. He thought it was a cold gun. It contained blanks. Obviously, whether it was because of the armorer, Gutierrez Reed, or the assistant director, Dave Halls, or someone else who was involved, the gun was not a cold gun, did contain live rounds. So I think you want to look at, the people who are involved, right? Obviously, look, and again, no one can consent to being shot, right? But in the Baldwin case, one of his arguments was, well, listen, I'm an actor. I'm relying on an armorer whose job is to maintain these weapons, right? That's reasonable. I'm relying on my assistant director who's telling me the gun is not loaded. And then as far as pointing it at another human being, you're obviously not supposed to do that. The cinematographer, we're shooting a movie, she's telling me to point it at her. Now the question was, did he pull the trigger? Did he not? The FBI in that case determined that he did pull the trigger. That was one of the worst pieces of evidence against Alec Baldwin. Here we don't know how the gun ended up in her hand, how it got loaded, why it was pointed at someone. There's a lot of unknowns in this case that will really determine the level of culpability, because really, again, if she's told it's a cold gun, or it's unloaded, not cold because it didn't have live rounds, but if the defendant in this case is told it's a cold gun, it's unloaded, she doesn't have a lot of experience, it seems like it's unloaded, she's holding it, not pointing it at someone, it drops or somehow discharged and ricochets, I think that would be very good for the defendant, right? But if she's holding the gun, she loaded it herself, she's pointing it at someone messing around, well, that's murder in my opinion.
And we'll see how this case plays out. Very much in the beginning stages, but first court appearance now that has already been done. Nima Romani, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Of course, Chris. Thanks for having me as always.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.